Hi everyone. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to render a movie file from After Effects. Okay, let's get started. What we're doing when we render in After Effects is taking everything in our composition and export it out as one single movie file. There are a couple different ways we can render this out of After Effects. We want to make sure that we're rendering a small compressed video file, and one easy way to do that is by exporting this to Media Encoder. Media Encoder is another Adobe program that you get when you download After Effects. This is it right here, and we can use it to convert different media files. So to export it straight to Media Encoder right from After Effects, you just have to make sure to have your composition selected in the project panel, go up to File, Export, Add to Adobe Media Encoder queue. And I'm going to click that and it'll automatically open Media Encoder. Once it opens, it might take a little while to load up your project. There it is right there, and now we can choose some settings to convert it. So the first setting you want to use is make sure this is set to H.264. So just drop down the menu and click H.264. Next drop-down menu, we're going to select Vimeo 1080p because that's the size of our composition, Full HD. And I'm going to use the Vimeo file because that's compressing it best for Vimeo, and that's where we're going to be uploading our projects. So I'll select that, and then you can click the output file here to select where you want to save it. I'm just going to select my desktop and hit save. Once you get those settings in, all you have to do is go up to the top corner here and hit the little play button to start it. And it's going to render it right from After Effects with these settings. Once it's done rendering, I'll just minimize these and I can locate it here on my desktop. So that rendered it out as a single movie file. If I click on that, I can play it. So we can also export straight from After Effects, but you might not have the option to save it out as a smaller compressed file. So that's why I used Media Encoder. To render it right from After Effects, what we could do with our composition selected, go up to the top menu under Composition, Add to Render Queue. What that's going to do is send it to this panel here, which is our render queue. Under Render Settings, I'm going to click that, and you just want to make sure that you have quality set to best, resolution set to full, and then make sure under frame rate right here that Use Comps Frame Rate is clicked, and that's at 24 frames per second. And then you can just hit OK. Under Output Module is where we select our file format, and I'm just going to click on that. Right now we have it set to AVI. You can render it out as an AVI. That's going to be a fully uncompressed file, so it's going to be a really big file that we'll have to convert later in Media Encoder. So I'll go down to QuickTime, and I'm just going to click on Format Options here. Under Video Codec, we have a few more options. The first one selected is Animation, and just like with the AVI, a QuickTime animation is an uncompressed file. So if I'm trying to render out something at full quality, I'm going to render it with this codec. It's going to make a really big file though, so we're going to want again to compress that later. If you do have the option in here for H.264, which I don't, you can select that one and it's going to compress your video file right out of After Effects, and you can skip the step of using Media Encoder. But since I don't have that option in here, I'm going to export it as a fully uncompressed file, and then we'll convert that one to something smaller. Okay, so with animation selected, I'm going to hit OK. And then you also want to make sure that your audio output is set to auto. And that'll just make sure that your audio is on. And then right here we can select where we want it to output to. So I'm going to click that, and I'm just going to send it to my desktop. With all of your options set, then you just come up here and click Render. Once it finishes, I can just locate it where I saved it to here on my desktop. So this is the uncompressed QuickTime animation file. If I look at the properties for it, you can see it's quite a large file. It's 2.7 gigs. So we're going to want to compress that down to something smaller. So I'm going to open up Media Encoder, and you can get to it by going to Creative Cloud and finding it in the menu. So I'm just going to clear out the previous queue, and I'll click on it and just hit delete. So now to convert this one, we can just drag it and drop it right into this panel here. Again, I want to make sure that I have H.264 set, and if for some reason you don't have these same settings, just let me know and I'll help you figure it out. And then I'm also going to make sure we have it set to Vimeo. And I can just choose where I want to output it to. It's adding a 1 on the end here because I already have one saved to the desktop, so that's fine. And I'll hit save, and then again, just hit the little play button here to start the queue. And once that's done, once again, it saves it to my desktop here. And I can compare the size. So now it's 49.7 megabytes as opposed to 2.7 gigabytes. So it's a way smaller file now. Okay, that's how you're going to render your compositions out of After Effects. That's going to do it for this tutorial.